Welcome to Recharge TV, episode 7. I'm Adriana Locke, your host. And before we get started, we have a little announcement. Today's episode is sponsored by Massage in a Box, which is the all-in-one kit to do cupping at home to relieve pain and tension whenever you need it. And it's the holiday season, so it's a great gift for self-care for you and your loved ones. Let's bring in Rini York, our guest today. Hey, Rini.
Hi.
It's so awesome to have you. We've been friends and colleagues for a while, and I can't wait to dive in and talk to you about all the things. Let's do a little bit of grounding meditation so we can just kind of center ourselves and call in the conversation that needs to be had today, if you'll join me. So, feet on the floor, settling into our sits bones. With every out breath, just letting our bodies relax down into the floor, into our seat. Letting go of the day so far. Bringing ourselves into the present moment. And as we sink, also letting our head be suspended from the sky, from the heavens. Like we have a thread from the top of our head, lengthening upward and relaxing downward. Again, with every out breath, relaxing our body and our mind. With every in-breath, letting ourselves lengthen toward the sky, being held by the earth and buoyed by the sky. And taking a few more breaths here, we welcome in any guides, any ancestors who love us beyond all reason and want to hold this space with us over time and space. For whatever conversation needs to be had in this moment. And taking a few more breaths, feeling held. If you've closed your eyes, let them open gently and come back to this space. So we have a tradition of picking a tarot card. So I'm going to shuffle, and Rini, why don't you let me know when I should stop? I'll pick a card.
Okay. Now.
Okay. I'm always like, what will it be? Ooh, I got this card the other day.
Oh.
The 9 of Wands. So I'm using the Wild Unknown Tarot.
Oh, great.
And let's take a look. So the 9 of Wands. Beep. Strength, stamina, confidence. As 9s usually imply, your journey is near completion. But on this final stretch, you find yourself growing weary. Doubt and fear are running through your mind. The 9 of Wands asks you to rally your confidence and realize how far you've come. Lift your eyes and take a few more steps. Soon, all your hard work will start to pay off.
Yeah, that's like totally right on.
Are you feeling that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love this imagery of the stairs being kind of clogged by these branches that, you're like, I'm almost there, but this is hard. And what are you feeling in that?
Well, I think for me, just really, there's been so much change and transition. So I feel like, I feel that there's been so much work that I've done. And it's kind of like, I feel like I'm at that place of taking that leap of faith,
Mm.
So it's like at that place, then I'm like, oh, is this like, can I do this? Or, like those doubts and things come up. But it's like there's nothing left to keep standing on. So I have to,
Mm-hmm.
leap. So,
Yeah. And I know I mean, a lot of that change is happening because of COVID, like so many people with the pandemic and changing the way you've been doing business
yeah,
and moving to virtual versus in person. And
exactly.
I think a lot of people can relate to that, even if they're not small business owners.
Yeah.
Just the upheaval of the year and the election that just happened in the US, and people are tired, we're exhausted, but also like the work isn't quite done,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
In this in between space, and in that in between space, it's tricky because it's like you can't really go back, and then there's not really a clear of what's ahead. And so there's that unknown space. It's like that void in between. Like you said with the election, it's kind of like we're literally in between, right? We're in between, like, presidencies right now. It's just like,
mhm,
and that transition is so tough,
mhm,
in Chinese medicine, how we talk about Xiaoyang, that, it's in between. And I have a very Xiaoyang, constitution. So
mhm,
I I struggle with that in between with transition. It's like, I've built up a lot of good self-care practices and rituals, and I've done a lot of that work. And then when things change, I'm always like, oh, how do I then shift that into this new, like business of like in this new structure of, business and schedule, or, like with the school changes, like, how do I integrate self-care when I also need to be monitoring my kids on their school laptops all day? And, all of those changes can be tricky.
mhm. Yeah. And you mentioned Shaoyang. How do you describe that for people who don't know Chinese medicine?
Yeah, I think the Xiaoyang, the thing that I think of is like those in between places, or the kind of when things tend to alternate, like go from one to the other. So, like temperature wise, I tend to go cold and then hot. Like I literally have piles of sweaters all over the house because, even this change of season that we're in, that's that kind of in between Xiaoyang stage of like, oh, is it going to be a hot day or a cold day? And so then I'm like wearing a sweater, and then it gets too hot. So then I take it off, and then, then I'm like turning up the heat, turning down the heat, and
Mhm,
that fluctuating place,
mhm,
um, when I talk to my patients about Xiaoyang, I think of like, okay, so if there's this room here, the doorway, like standing in the doorway is the Xiaoyang. Like you're not in the room and you're not in the hallway, you're in between, and you could go either way,
mhm.
Does that?
Yeah, I had a teacher describe it as like you're in a fun house, like a house of mirrors, and you can't you can't get out. And the remedy, right, in Chinese medicine is you have to harmonize. Like you
Right.
have to
Yes.
you can't push it out. You can't like
Push
push
it
it
down.
down. You can't push it out. You have to harmonize. I think that's a very well, we would say it's a very common diagnosis, right? Like especially in the US. Um, we're kind of like internally uh, verklempt a lot of times, and so we have to harmonize.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, that is very appropriate for this time of year. So, yeah, I mean, this does seem to give a way out, right? Like
Right.
just keep going, you
Yeah.
know?
Exactly.
Um, but yeah, but it is tricky in the moment. You're just like, how do I just relax into the unknown,
Yeah.
right? And trust and have a lot of faith, right? And I feel like you are really good at that, like cultivating faith, with your different practices. And um, yeah, I kind of want to ask you a little bit more about that. Uh,
It's interesting because it's something, gosh, I feel like it's been maybe 6 months or maybe 9 months that I went back to my kind of my childhood given name of Rini in India, and especially I'm Bengali, so from West Bengal, and so um, you get a given name. So it's like a nickname, but it's really the name that everybody calls you. So it's more than a nickname. It's like all my family, extended family, family friends, like everybody. I was introduced as Rini. My birth certificate said Rebecca, but really it wasn't used until I went to school. So and outside of school, everyone still called me Rini. So, I mean, until even now, just throughout my whole life, my family has always called me that. So, as you know, just I've really gone through a lot of transformation in the last few years, and through that process, and like the sound healing that I do, and like the sacred geometry, all of these things started linking together, different symbolism. And Rini means the sound a bell makes. And so that really, was one of these things, is I was like, oh, wow, that's amazing that this is the name I was given. And here I am studying the healing powers of sound. And it just felt fitting that, this is, and this, struggle I've had to really connect back with my heritage and my ancient roots and things like that. I live in Portland. My family and community lives back on the East Coast in Massachusetts. So I don't have people to speak my language with and things like that on a daily basis. I haven't taught it to my kids. So there's always been this, like, how do I connect with my heritage? And recently, that's what part of this transformation has led me to, is that reconnection with like the Ayurvedic medicine, like I would say spiritually as well, using mantra, which is also about sound, for healing, for meditation, for spirituality. And so all of these things were coming together. And so I went back to my name, Rini, and then I started looking at my other names. And so my maiden name is Bishash or Biswas. And it means like trust and faith and belief. So that really, and that's been a challenge of mine, of that like trust and faith in myself. And so that was also very poignant, of like, wow, okay, I get it, universe. I'm hearing you, of like that, the importance of that. And interestingly enough, I found out, I mean, I've known that Bishush is a title. So I believe it goes about 5 generations back. So my grandfather was given the title of Bishush. So it was, I guess, bestowed on him. And so that was, and it has been kept ever since. So it was not our original name. And even prior to that, our last name was Majumdar, which was also a title. And so that was given maybe another 4 or 5 generations back. So it's just really interesting to me that there's kind of that theme of like the title, and that, that meaning of the name is really significant. So.
Wow, that's interesting. And so that would have been bestowed by a ruling party in the area.
The first one, I believe it was still more that kind of feudal type of arrangement, I would say, in India, very like clan based, there's the property holders and things like that. The second name, I'm not sure how it was bestowed, but it had to have been some kind of set up like that,
And do you know, and you said it means faith.
Yes, that like, so there's different ways to use it, but it's like, to like, if you say like, Bishash karo, it's like to like believe, like, believe it or believe me, So like asking you to like believe, but it's also like to have trust in or faith
Mm.
in. Um, and so, yeah, so it's really interesting to me.
Mm. So it would be like one who can be trusted
Yes,
would
trust.
have that, would be trustworthy. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I love hearing about the reclamation. It's been a theme with a lot of the episodes because I think um, it's interesting how common it is with migration, with colonization, with
Yes.
um, slavery, with these kind of whether migration, whether forced or voluntary, that disconnects cultures,
Yes.
uh, and how many people are doing what you're doing of finding roots, right? Like searching for roots, especially in the US. We're such a culture of migrated peoples, of diaspora. And yeah, we're talking about faith, right? We're talking about journeying, on a hard path that maybe is coming to an end, but maybe isn't quite at an end. What has that been like for you to, and I know on your website you talk about being a student of the ancient technologies, which
Yeah.
I totally relate with.
Yeah.
And so I wonder what that's been like for you because you have a lot of history, right? You're an acupuncturist, you have a degree in acupuncture and Chinese medicine. I know you were a social worker. You're studying Ayurveda. I know, and a lot of the chakras and related technologies and culture. So what has that been like for you to uh, be on that path, and then have come to this moment where you're like, I'm integrating all of this stuff together.
You know, I think it's something now that feels like things are starting to come together in a way, like the puzzle pieces are coming together. Um, you know, your kids have, well, my experience with having kids is that, they're able to find your buttons and your insecurities and bring all of those things out into the light. And so, it's been an amazing experience, and I wouldn't be who I am without it. And it's been really challenging, you know, but like one of my kids said the other day they're like, well, you have 2 degrees and now you're like, why'd you close your acupuncture business? Like, did you move on or something? And I was like, no, it's more about integrating all of these experiences that I've had. And now I can see how they fit together. And, my master's in social work and acupuncture and Chinese medicine. Um, and this kind of personal study that I've had of ancient wisdom and sacred sciences, like how I can see them all fitting together. And it's been a long time where I didn't know where I was going. Like I was like, I know I'm headed somewhere, and I know it's like, it feels big. It feels like it's meant to be meaningful, but I have no idea where it is. And that place feels like, they talk about when a butterfly is in a cocoon and they actually decompose into cellular goop.
Mhm.
So a lot of the time I have felt like cellular goop. Like it's sticky, it's messy, and it's kind of all over the place. And again, there's that faith of like, I know it's got to lead somewhere because it can't
Mhm.
just be this. And so the process has definitely been challenging, with, I would say, a range of emotions, a range of like insecurities and thoughts and things like that. Definitely I went against well, I would say for a time I went with the grain of kind of what was expected in my family and followed that expected path, realizing I'm on someone else's path and not mine. And so then there's been this kind of stepping back to reclaiming and owning my own path, and so it's been challenging, but I finally feel now that I'm able to start really envisioning and um, seeing how this journey and process has brought me to where I am. When I was a kid, I was this, or, like an adolescent, there was this kind of like, I think just a lot of intense emotions and not sure how and where to put them and how to deal with them and things like that. And, now I can see how those struggles, those challenges have helped me gain empathy and compassion and a drive to really like heal and you know, help things be um, maybe easier for people, like help them find that connect to themselves and find their way forward.
Mm.
That not that there's like a prescribed way forward, because there isn't. I really trust the body's innate wisdom to guide us in that place. And so really I feel like the work that I do, and the meaning that I've made from all of this is, I have that kind of social work background. And I did a lot of trauma work was a lot of the focus that I had. And then I have all of that Chinese medicine and I love shiatsu. So all of that, the shiatsu theory, as well as, shiatsu has done a lot to help me with my alignment and my able to connect in to that, all that is, as well as how to put together, functionally what's happening with the meridians that are lighting up, and then combining, the sacred sciences of like with the chakras and, and really integrate all of those to be able to help people connect into their alignment, kind of fall deeper into their center and start connecting into their intuitive wisdom to find their ways forward and heal from trauma, or, sometimes it's ancestral trauma. So I really feel like this process, it is that kind of next step where, it feels like that kind of murky, unclear aspect of the path is the work that I've been doing. And now it's kind of like, well, now as things are integrating and coming together, how do I keep that, like what's the next step there?
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like, you started relatively conventional, right? Like working as a social worker, going to school as a social worker. And then, we were talking before this about ascension and how it's kind of like a loaded word. It's really woo.
Yeah.
It's like there's all kinds, and and it's true about, I would say, like sacred sciences in general. There's a lot of people out there doing a lot of different things.
Yes.
And I think it can be hard to know what's real or what's true.
Yeah.
And like what to actually have faith in or trust, right? Like what is trustworthy. Um, what has that been like for you, finding your way into like integrating that kind of more out there, according to some people, ways of being, ways of looking at the body, and finding your own path in that, or how, and knowing what was trustworthy.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of parts to that. I think, there's a part of it is that I feel like I've always really been on this spiritual journey, that's like my personal journey. And the last time we talked, I talked about my trip to India when I was 16, and it was the first time I had gone to India alone without my mom and my sister. And so it was a big deal for me. And I went to go stay with my grandparents, but mainly to see my grandma. I loved my grandma so much. She would call me her heart, and I would call her that she's my heart. And we just had a really, really important connection for me. And so when I went when I was 16, and I didn't know what to expect. And, I don't think she knew what to expect. And I went for 6 weeks, and I went and part of her daily ritual was going by the temple before, on the way home before dinner. So we would just go to the temple, and I really loved that part of our day. And she saw how much I really loved it. And there's these different, these series of temples that are on mountaintops in India. And I can't remember if there's 7 of them, but 7 is like the number that's coming in my mind. So it's maybe 7 or 9 of them. And so, my mashi is my aunt. So my mashi and my misho, my aunt and uncle, they took me, with my cousins, they took me to one of the mountains. And this one was by far the hardest one to climb. And so it was a 9-mile climb. They had previously tried to put different, like, trams and, even like they had a helicopter pad and things like that to try to make it more accessible, easier for people to get up. And there was always some kind of a disaster or breakdown or things like that prevented it being easier to go up there. So you had to go by foot. They did have, for elderly people, they would have like these kind of like these stretchers that, people would literally carry them up, like 2 to 4 people would carry them up the 9 miles. And they did also have donkeys to rent, but in any case, so we were going to, we were going there. And when we went, it's in the northern area of India known as Jammu Kashmir, which has a lot of like instability, like political instability. And there's a lot of fighting there over the borders. So when we went, we had to like time it. Well, a couple things. We wanted to get up by the morning, so we had to leave in the middle of the night, but it's also dangerous there in the middle of the night in the darkness. So we had to like sneak around to get there, and I remember like, my uncle had hired someone to like drive us to a certain like stop point and things like that. But we're having to like duck and all. And I didn't know a lot about it. I just knew like, you need to listen to them and what they tell you, Mm-hmm. So, yeah, so it was, I wasn't terrified, but I was like a little on edge of like, okay, what's happening here? And definitely confused. So, but we got there, we started, I believe, around midnight, and then we got up by 6 o'clock. And when we got up there, because the temple is actually in a cave, so when you enter, you have to go in single file. And they start by doing a puja or a ceremony, or the priest does. And when they do that, they televise it. And I think it's like, on their cable TV, so people can watch it. Mm-hmm. But they let like the first maybe 50 people who get up there into a room to watch it, kind of like live, kind of like next door in this room that was built to give shelter right around the opening of the cave. So we got into that room, and my mashi was like, she's like, oh my gosh, we come here all the time and we've never gotten into the room. She's like, you must be our lucky charm. And she was just so amazed. And she said, even recently, she said, even ever since then, so that was like in 1995, they've never been able to get into the room. That's the one and only time that they've. So we got into the room, we went through, and we went down, and it was just this hugely, I had never done any kind of like a pilgrimage or anything like that, but it was like, I left changed, and I don't know what, and I don't know why or how, but I did. I left changed. And a month or maybe a few weeks later, we went to another one. And that one was smaller, and they did have a tram. And we drove to that one. I think it it wasn't very far, but because it was like dirt roads and things like that, it was probably a 6 to 8 hour car ride, and it was like really bumpy, like bad roads. And I had a fever, and I didn't want to tell them because I didn't want to not go. So I went with this fever, and it was a pretty bad fever. And then by the time we got there, I was really sick. Like I was all out, I don't know from what, but I was really sick. And and we had gone up to the mountain temple and then come back, and then we were in the hotel, and I was so sick, and I was like, I want to go home. And she was like, oh, you want to go back to your Dida, which is my grandma? And I was like, no, I want to go home. Like, I want to go back to America. I was just like, and that was, I was 16. I had a rough relationship with my parents at the time. That was probably the last thing that I would ever in the world say, So it was very poignant that I said that. And she just felt horrible and didn't know what to do. And then when I was feeling a little better, she's like, let's get some fresh air. And so we went for a walk, and there was we were walking to the Ganga River, or the River Ganges, which is by far the holiest river in India, at least right now. And so on the path, there's all these like mini temples of these natural stones that resemble different deities. And so there's all these temples, and there's one right by the river when we got there, and it was for Lord Shiva, which is, my grandma always said, if anything's wrong, like if you're stressed or anxious or, just pray to Lord Shiva. And I literally, I just collapsed on the ground, like crying. And I had no idea what I was grieving or anything like that, but I just kind of broke down crying. There was just that kind of release happening. And again, I left changed, I just, and I feel like even my fever went down, it was just, that trip was so poignant for me. And it took me, I think, more until just recently to understand that significance, that I have always been on this spiritual path, through my life. And it's just been a matter of making it mine, not thinking what someone else is, but what is it I believe in? What, and owning it. And so that's really what this process has been for me, is really, stop trying to live up to other people's idea of who I should be and what I should do, and really just be me, regardless of how people feel, which as a recovering people pleaser is really, really challenging. So it's not easy, but it's, I feel the importance of it. So with this ascension, it's one of those things that, I can't deny it, that drive is there in me, and it's part of that spiritual journey that I'm on, to connect greater to spirit, and not any particular god, goddess, or anything, but just that creator spirit, and anything that I can do to connect more deeply with that feels like that is my life path. And so, I trust that kind of gut resonance that I have. And, even with certain words, it's like inside things will start buzzing or lighting up, And, I was talking to one of my friends, and we were talking about these things and our businesses, and we're helping each other out. And, it was just so clear really to both of us, when I was talking about ascension, when I was talking about activation, when I'm talking about ancestral healing and healing in general, like those are the areas that light me up. And I can either, I can either continue to not be myself and live, kind of more of a dull life, or I can work on, more full expression of who I am. So that's really where it comes from. Inherently, I would say I'm always a very grounded, earthy person. So inherently, it's not this kind of ungrounded aspect of ascension. It's really more about full embodiment of and honoring, who we are. And I feel like, it's like a vortex. I love sacred geometry. So if you think of that vortex, right? In the vortex, you have that central alignment, but there's this concurrent expansion out and folding back in, right? So both things are happening, and it's that like that yin yang togetherness, right? And there's this wholeness. And so it's by going within that you can get to that widest expansion, and vice versa.
Mm.
So it's not this untethered ascension. It's not rising to be a better person, because that to me is judgmental, to be like that there's anything wrong with you right now, which is not true. That's just, that's someone else's thing. That's not true. So, it's really about full embodiment into who we are. And when we do that, we are connected to spirit, because we're connected to all that is. And so that's what this ascension activation is all about. It's like activating your whole self. And like the whole self can be messy. It can be, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't have to be this clean process. Like it's not void of some feelings and not others. It's like, it's all of it. It's like, it's fierceness, it's softness, it's everything. And so that's the work I feel like is my journey. And I feel like, we are all anyway connected to all that is. And I feel like it's more rich when we are in connection with that, right? I mean, spirit runs through us regardless. So whether we know it or not, or, whether we like feel it or not, it's like, it's not like I'm ever really disconnected. I'm just not aware of it. But I feel like that richness comes from being aware of it and embodying it fully and embracing it, however it is. Yeah. So it's definitely, my view of it is this more non-judgmental view of it, like it's not about, there's this, I don't like to say higher self, like in my meditations and things like that. I don't like to call in my higher self, because that elevates it from me. And I like to say like infinite self, or, like infinite eternal self, that part of me that is infinite, that keeps going through all time, which is connected to me and not separate from me. So I don't know if that answers your question.
That was amazing. That was a whole transmission. Yeah, and sounds like your work, both personally and professionally, like with other people, is about cultivating that awareness, that embodied connection, that in the whole embodiment of a person.
Yeah.
And the awareness of our inherent oneness,
Yeah.
with
Yes.
all that is, with spirit, right?
Yeah.
And that and thus like embodying our physical body, but also like our spiritual inheritance.
Yeah.
It sounds like. And so all the tools that you use, I mean, you're naming so many tools: sacred geometry, sound healing, acupuncture, shiatsu, are all these tools that help you and others move in that direction, like center in and also kind of become aware of the beyond.
Yeah. So I would say, before COVID, I would say shiatsu was my primary way of helping people connect to that. And part of the challenge of COVID is like, who am I if I'm not a body worker? Because my way of tapping in and say transmitting that was through my hands, right? And so, having and I'm grateful for the help that I got to realize that it's like that is not the only way that I can do this work. That this healing can be transmitted in other ways as well. And so that has really opened up these possibilities of working with people, without the close contact. And so, hold on, I'm losing my train of thought. But, so I think anyway, so I do use all of these tools. And now I put them together. For instance, right now I'm doing a class on embodied practices to release trauma. And so really helping people to connect to these practices, these ancient wisdom, from Tai Chi, from Qigong, from, different meditations, journeying meditations, and helping people learn how to tap in, how to connect with themselves. It can be so hard to find that quiet, within these days. And so helping guide people in, and then using these tools, using, acupressure and teaching them these movements and guiding them through these so that they can really take on this healing and do what's helpful for them, and help empower them to move it through. And what's nice is I've also been able to incorporate with the social work and do psychoeducation along with that. My biomed background from my Chinese medicine degree as well. And, like talking about how the brain works and talking about, how trauma and memory is stored in the brain. There's science that backs up ancestral trauma now. There's science that actually shows the transmission of a trauma response to 3 generations without having experienced the same trauma. So, so we talk about things to help people have this awareness and have more or build more compassion for themselves. And then also these movement practices or, ancient wisdom practices to help people, clear them, integrate them, those kinds of things. So really it is a lot of tools. It's this, I would consider it really holistic in terms of trying to, appeal to people's rational brain as well. You know what I mean? Like, right. Yeah. Brain, there's left brain, there's integration things, appealing to their body, their mind, their spirit, their emotions, and really, because, usually like many of these areas are affected, or many of these areas get involved in making us feel worse. There's a lot of thoughts that are like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get better? Or, like, why am I still dealing with this? Or other people like, why are you still dealing with this? It was so long ago. And, there's a lot of that blame. And we talk about, really when I talk about trauma, I don't want to add any more, so when I talk about trauma, it's like, I want to talk about it from an empowering place. I don't want to talk about it from a place of like, there's something wrong, there's something broken, like nothing needs, there's healing to be done, but nothing needs to be fixed, it needs to be like repaired in you, it's like everything that we've done to respond to trauma is done to protect, right? It's done to protect your soul, your essence of who you are, and so there's an embracing or an acceptance in that. Like there was nothing wrong with how somebody responded to a trauma, like where I was this chronic people pleaser, like there's nothing wrong with that. That served a purpose. And now I can learn other tools that can better serve me for where I'm at now. So really looking at that place of like, if spirit runs through you and you are connected to all that is, then how could anything be wrong with you?
Yeah. And how does one feel that so deeply that it can be a foundation for your being? You
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
Yeah, a place of faith and trust in oneself,
Yes.
right? And I hear you saying there are many doors in like that you can access this
Yeah.
work, right? Or this process. And you're helping people, access whatever door works best for them.
Yeah, and that's, the more I study ancient wisdom, the more I feel that is, there's these kind of like big T truths, and you know, they just accessed it in a different way, and so not that one's right and the other's wrong. They're just different access points to very similar places. And so there's no right and there's no wrong in that. It's just finding the one that resonates with you, and then once that's a match, then, it's going to do the work. And so, that I feel like that's that work is like, so I have all these tools, but I can't determine what's going to be the right tools for somebody else, but I can help, guide someone to connect with themselves, and I can present all of these things and I can offer them, and then I can support, you in figuring out and problem solving how to integrate them, and how to recognize what works and what's not, and that kind of through that kind of work, so that it's really this kind of guidance and supportive kind of role, and a sharing whatever it is that I've learned. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's beautiful in its compassion for someone's process and someone's uniqueness, right? And um yeah, if people want to get in touch with you and work with you, how can they do that?
Yeah. So I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and through those you can also connect with my Linktree account. I have a website, and I try to make it really easy to kind of connect to those places. Some people reach out through Facebook, some through the website. So, or through Instagram. If you message me, I am usually really quick to message back. I offer free consultations if you're just like, I'm not sure what would work, I'd be happy to talk to you. I have my phone number listed on my website. You can text me, it's not a big deal. You can reach out. I don't have, someone who answers the phone. It's just me. So whatever way works best, you can email me. You can just, any of those things. Right now I'm in the middle of a couple of classes. They're 6-week classes, and I wanted to be able to get those in before the holidays, but I'm definitely going to start another series. One is that one I talked about, embodied practices for trauma release, and the other is a foundations of Tai Chi class. And yeah, they're going great. And I look forward to starting one again, maybe giving a little holiday breather, and starting in the end of January or beginning to mid-February. So there's that. I also offer like 3-month and 6-month programs to work with me one-on-one weekly over like Zoom. And, that's where we can really dial in, and I can really, we can dive deep and support someone into, finding the tools that work to, integrate and, release what's not working, releasing those burdens that are, stopping you, releasing that struggle, that feels like what's in your way. So that's more of a deep dive way of working with me. And then if you just want to be on my social media, and usually I'm posting little tips, tricks, tools, brain hacks, and sometimes like card readings and things like that. So
Yeah, some beautiful posts about finding the light in the darkness and all kinds of good stuff for the times, I think. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. There's some of that info in this banner, and we'll include it in the notes, of course, and so people can get a hold of you. and access some of this amazing work that you do.
Oh, thank
So
you.
thank you so much, friend, for
Yeah,
coming and talking. And yeah, just
thank
want to
you.
give thanks to all the guides and the ancestors that have been with us and help us hold this space, and the Nine of Wands for showing us the way and helping us hold the faith. So,
Thank you so much for having me. I've loved it so much.
and to all the people watching, thank you for being here, and let us know what you think in the comments if you're watching the replay. So we'll see you next week.